welcome. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you to Lab Biotech for inviting us, and thank you very much to the two other speakers of the session, in particular Ralf, who's going to be one of our success stories of an SME that was received some funding from us, and he's going to talk to you about how it actually helped him, how he integrated that into his strategy for his company. And Alessandro from the EIB, from the European Investment Bank, with whom we as European Commission work together. So we actually co-invest part of our money from Horizon through the into the European Investment Bank, that then in turn provides financing for SMEs. I'm going to try in my talk to give you an overview of the overall landscape of EU funding for SMEs, concentrating mostly on the specific SME instrument, but also on some other opportunities. But I would suggest that you interrupt me at any time. We're not a big audience. I mean, we're not a huge room here. So if you stop me, I'll be happy to take questions at any time. So with that, this is an attempt to show you what is being done for health research in Horizon 2020. You have at the focus the societal challenge, SC1 for health, with a total funding volume of 7.3 billion. The 31 billion is the overall other societal challenges. And in there you have at the heart the collaborative projects, about which I'm going to talk a little bit. You also have the Innovative Medicines Initiative, IMI, a public-private partnership, which I'm also going to talk about. And I'm not going to talk about two other instruments because I think they're of less interest to this audience. The European Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership, which is a public-public partnership between the Commission and Member States, and the Ambient Assisted Living public-public partnership. We then have the second pillar of Horizon 2020, industrial leadership, where you have a number of different instruments, many of which are not theme-specific, so not specific for health, but for all areas, and where again SMEs can find funding. I don't have the time today to go into, and also on some of them don't know enough to tell you much about them, except for the financial instruments. That's something that Alessandro is going to cover in his talk. And then you have the excellent science pillar, which is mostly for like frontier, basic, fundamental, blue sky research. But again, there might very well be opportunities for SMEs also in this third pillar. But I'm not going to talk about that today. This is another attempt to group our different funding instruments in a scheme where you have on the right upper side the market pull forces with more advanced commercial development and technological development. And on the bottom left, you have the more blue sky fundamental research instruments. So this is a soon-to-be slightly outdated overview of our priorities. I'm presenting you here the priorities of the current work program 2016-17, but some of them, above all, personalized medicine is going to stay with us for the years 2018 to 20. I have in one of the next slides a little bit of a sneak preview of what we're going to do in 2018 to 20. Infectious diseases and global health stays with us as one of the priorities. So does health ICT, and so does, in a slightly broader frame, also the human biomonitoring as part of the environment and health program. And maternal and child health, we're also going to pursue that. So you're probably familiar with the EU definition of a small and medium-sized enterprise. So that means less than 250 employees, less or equal than 50 million euro annual turnover, and less than 43 million euro annual balance sheet, and an autonomous entity. And there's more detail, especially on what the autonomous entity entails, at the link that is provided here. So again, we have a number of opportunities for SMEs. Some of them are implemented directly by the European Commission, so by us ourselves. That is mostly the collaborative research and the SME instrument. We also have prices. The price for which the deadline, this is an inducement price where we specify what we want, and then you apply with your product, and if that product wins and is considered by the jury, by the independent evaluators as being the best entry, then you get, in this case, 1 million euro without any strings attached, whereas for the other instruments you need to report of what you do with it financially, but in the case of prices, this is no strings attached. And then we have a number of things that we implement with others. I already mentioned the Innovative Medicines initiatives. I already mentioned some of the public-public partnerships. And you're going to hear about the Innofin financial instruments from Alessandro. And then we do a lot in collaboration with other funders, international. So for example, the Birthday Prize, we do that together with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. TATFAR is the Transatlantic Partnership for Antimicrobial Resistance. GACD is the Global Alliance for Chronic Diseases, etc., and there are more of these. So collaborative research. In the 2018 to 20 work program, which will be published by the end of 2017, as I said, this is just a sneak preview of the priorities. We continue with personalized medicine, innovative health and care industry, infectious diseases and improving global health, innovative health and care system, integration of care, decoding the role of the environment for health and well-being, digital transformation and trusted digital solutions and cybersecurity in health and care. This is for collaboration between countries, sectors and disciplines, and the normal minimum requirements for participation are 3 legal entities from 3 different EU member states or framework program associated countries. This is not true for the SME instrument. I'm going to talk about that. That is a mono-beneficiary instrument for which one SME can apply a loan. And interesting for some of you, US entities are fully eligible for funding. That is because of a reciprocity agreement that we have with the NIH, which funds a lot of European researchers. Now that is not true for the SME instrument. That is obviously restricted to EU and framework program associated countries, but the collaborative research, so in consortia, we fund US beneficiaries. The SME instrument is inspired by the US Small Business Innovation Research Program. It's single company support. It's only for SMEs established in EU or Horizon in 2020 associated countries. That's mostly the EFTA countries, it's Switzerland, it's the neighborhood countries, so the Balkan countries, and it's a few other countries. It is competitive, market-oriented with an EU dimension. There are several cutoff dates per year. I have a slide with more details, and resubmission is possible. It comes in 3 phases, for which I think phase 2 is the most relevant for you. Phase 1 is a lump sum of 50,000 euro for basically for development of a business plan. Phase 2 is the key research phase with up to around 36 months, currently up to 5 million. And in most cases with the 100% funding rate actually. This is for clinical trials, for development, prototyping, scaling up, design, etc. And in the 3rd phase, we don't provide direct funding, but we provide some support via networking, training, coaching, mentoring, and so on. So the topics that are currently out in our work program for 2017 is one on cell technologies in medical applications. That is for phase 2 only, but which is the phase that is most interesting to you, probably. The last cutoff date this year, and the only one that is from now until the end of the year still open, is the 18th of October 2017. The overall budget is 115 million in the 2 years. I can't tell you exactly how much is left now for this last deadline, but it's going to be approximately 1/6, I believe, of that. And as I mentioned, it gives you you can fund your costs that are eligible under this grant with 100% from our money. And there is a second topic on accelerating market introduction of ICT solutions for health, well-being, and aging well. And there you still have 2 phase 1 cutoff dates and the same phase 2 cutoff date as for the other instrument. And here the funding rate is only 70%. So you can fund your eligible costs with 70% of our money. What is the success rate? Well, it's not brilliant. It's not exactly very encouraging. We had out of 108 proposals, we had 50 that were above threshold, and of those 50 we could fund 9. So on the overall thing, it is 8. On the overall submission rate, it is 8.3%. We would like it to be higher, but that's the situation that we live with at the moment. That might change next year. I'm going to present you the plans for next year. This is the early plans, draft plans for a European Innovation Council as a pilot in our work program 2018 to 20. None of this is finalized or published yet, but this is what we're currently thinking of. The main changes will concern the SME instrument. That will be the core part of this new European Innovation Council in this pilot phase. And the two changes that are most relevant are that it's going to be completely bottom up, so not as currently limited to specific topics, so not cell technologies or ICT for aging or anything, but it's going to be open to all applications in any field actually, and which also means that health SMEs compete with other ICT SMEs and others, so bottom up. And the second big difference, which is not on this slide, is that they are thinking about introducing an interview phase at the second selection stage, which is currently not the case. So currently this is only based on your proposal, but in 2018 it will probably include an interview phase for the final selection. Okay, this is then the encouraging part, or maybe the motivating part. We found that actually all 9 EU health unicorns, I hope that number is still correct, it might have gone up, since have participated in the predecessor program, Framework Program 7, and in Horizon projects, if you see names that you're probably familiar with. So all of these have participated in our collaborative projects, and some of them, one of them, CureVac, actually has gotten our first prize, our first inducement prize ever, and I think there are also some that are in the SME instrument. I think Immunovia, no, well, it's not on here, but I think Immunovia also is a success of the SME instrument. One slide on a funding stream that I don't know enough about, or that we don't have time also to go into here. Eureka Eurostars is a public partnership between the Commission and Member States, but where the end beneficiaries are SMEs. So this focus is to stimulate growth and research innovation in SMEs. Budget is high, I don't have the absolute figure here. Here you have a minimum participation of 2 organizations from 2 participating countries. It's more than just the EU countries. It's bottom up also. It has a higher success rate. The typical project size is slightly smaller, and as mentioned, you need 2 entities. It's also market oriented. 70% of the participants are SMEs, but it's open to all organizations, and more info under the website. And my last 4 slides, I think, are on the Innovative Medicines Initiative. As I mentioned, public-private partnership, jointly funded by FPIA, the pharmaceutical industry, the European pharmaceutical industry, and the European Commission. No European Commission money goes directly to FPIA companies. The European Commission money goes only to universities, SMEs, and patient groups. SMEs do play a leading role in many IMI projects. Of course, the objectives of your company or the approach of your company needs to be aligned with the IMI project. At the end of 2016, we had around 200 SME participations. The majority of these are biotech. We also have some IT data management companies and some in project management. SMEs account for 15% of the overall funding. Why should you participate? Because it gives you a unique opportunity to collaborate with in pharmaceutical research and development. Because IMI projects are focused on translating research into real-world outcomes, because collaboration with large pharmaceutical companies can be beneficiary in many respects, and because you build on research business networks, and it's of course also a direct funding opportunity, again with 100% funding rate for SMEs. What is currently open? We have one call that is permanently open since more than a year. That's the Ebola and other filoviral hemorrhagic fevers program. There we have 2 cutoff dates left, and we have the following topics which are currently under consideration, published on the website, but not yet finally decided. You can see infectious disease burden and vaccines in aging populations, neurodegenerative metabolic disease, European Screening Center, technology that enables quantitative and sensitive measures in Alzheimer's, of cognitive decline in people with early stage Alzheimer's disease, and development of sensitive and validated clinical endpoints in Sjögren's syndrome. That was it. What is missing here, what I don't have here, is as a web address for more information, very important. There's a national contact point in each EU country, in each associated country. Find it very easy if you Google National Contact Point Horizon 2020. They have people who specialize in the SME instrument, who specialize in advising SMEs, so that's your first point of call for more information on anything you want to know about Horizon 2020, really. And with that, I think I'll hand to, any urgent questions now? Otherwise, maybe it's better if we take if we have a bigger round afterwards, after all 3 of us, but yes. Okay.
What's the current position with the UK? Any company that is based in the UK
Good question, $100 million question. But actually, I mean, the formal answer is very simply. Currently, they have exactly the same rights and obligations as any other EU member state, so they are eligible to apply. They are in proposals. They do get funded. They can be coordinators. There are no restrictions. No restrictions at all. What happens in the future, we don't know. So anything is up to negotiation, but currently no restrictions, and do include them.
Thank you, Cornelius, and thanks Labiotech also for inviting the European Investment Bank. I have the daunting task of keeping you awake in this mid-afternoon session, talking about financial instruments. So it's just bear with me. And so what I will do in the next, if technology allows, what I will do in the next 10-15 minutes is give you a very brief introduction about the EIB, for those of you who don't know. I will talk a little bit about the programs for innovation, so including life sciences, but not only. I will talk about the lending volumes of the EIB on the life science sector, and then probably the most interesting bit for the companies in the audience, talk about the specific instrument targeting innovative companies. And since it's not only about finance, I will also touch upon the advisory services of the European Investment Bank. So for those of you who don't know, this is who we are, even though the picture doesn't quite reflect the weather in Luxembourg. So it's a Luxembourg-based institution. We like to call ourselves the EU bank, rightly so, because the shareholders are the 20 EU member states. We do about between 60 and 70 billion of investments a year. You see here about 450 projects each year, over 160 countries, mostly focused on the EU, of course. 3,000 staff based in Luxembourg, 60, 70 billion of investments a year over the past 6-7 years. So you see here the growth rate. Our priorities are, some of you may know the bank as an infrastructure bank, infrastructure finance bank. It's not only an infrastructure finance bank. You see our commitments also towards innovation, SMEs, environment, which is increasing year by year. So it's more and more we are innovation also, innovation finance bank. So I would like to touch upon the two major programs for innovation, for innovative companies. One of them is called European Fund for Strategic Investment. The other one is called Innofin. And you may recall from Cornelius' presentation earlier on that Innofin is part of this of the Horizon 2020 product family. Perhaps one element to say just up front, you've seen with Cornelius the whole ecosystem of grant-based instruments within Horizon. The European Investment Bank does not do grants, so we're talking about mostly equity, mostly indirect equity, guarantees and debt type instruments. So no grants, financial instruments only. And these are the two sort of programs that the EIB has in collaboration with the European Union, so the European Commission, targeting innovation. So once again, the European Fund for Strategic Investment and the Innofin program, which are essentially risk-sharing instruments, whereby the Commission or the EU budget provides a guarantee to the EIB, and the EIB takes a certain amount of risk vis-a-vis more innovative, more risky projects, including life sciences, but not only. So I don't want to bore you on the mechanics, just for you to know these are risk-sharing instruments between the EIB and the European Commission. And what is probably more interesting is so on the Innofin product suite is what also Cornelius alluded to, which is this thematic finance, the orange bit, which includes a dedicated life science financing instrument targeting vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics devices against infectious diseases, and I will talk a little bit about that. So all across you see all sorts of instruments essentially. So these are equity-based instruments and debt-based instruments. Perhaps another takeaway for you to know is that the EIB does not take equity positions into individual companies. All our equity investments are via venture capital funds. So we invest into venture capital funds, the venture capital funds invest into companies. So no equity and no grants. Our equity investments are always intermediated. What we do, our bread and butter, is debt. So debt instruments of all sorts, from very senior debt to subordinated to venture debt, so some debt that has also equity features. So high risk, very high risky debt, and therefore more relevant for companies in their early stage, more, let's say, more risky, and they're less developed in their earlier development phase. So in the yellow bit, again, unfortunately we don't have the time to go into the details, but happy to answer question afterwards. On the yellow bit, you see the titles here. We have guarantee instruments and venture capital instruments. Indeed, these are, let's say, intermediated instruments via banks or, again, venture capital funds. The principle, once more, we provide financing to such institutions on a competitive basis, and they on-lend to SMEs, to high innovative SMEs, again, on a competitive basis in terms of lower collateral requirements, better pricing, longer maturities, and so on. The blue bit is what we do, DAB delivers directly. So these are debt instruments. So you come to DAB with investment proposals, and there are people at DAB that looks into specific investment proposals. Same thing for the orange bit. So this is dedicated thematic financing instruments for infectious diseases projects and for energy demo projects. And the green bit is the advisory component of Innofin. So a wide range suite of financing instruments for all stages of companies' development. So what do we do in the life science sector? You see here the evolution. Some years are not particularly impressive, some others are. An average investment volume of about 800 million a year, with Germany and Italy playing the lion's share. So once again, what is available for companies that are bringing a project to DAB for financing? So this is what we like to present, our product portfolio. So we lend, we blend, and we advise. Unfortunately, a lot of this jargon doesn't tell much, probably to most of you. But so the lending bit is probably easier. As I said, mostly debt instruments and intermediated investments via venture capital funds. We blend, so we combine our risk-taking capacity, so DAB risk-taking capacity, with the EU budget, and we come up with risk-sharing solutions for the benefit of companies. And we advise, so we have a sort of technical assistance, advisory, supporting service that allows company to enter into this machinery and hopefully come out with a successful outcome. And again, probably more interesting for most of you is the individual instrument, individual products, and some of the terms of these instruments. So I would like to briefly touch upon three of them. One is what we mentioned earlier, the infectious disease financing facility. The other one is called mid-cap growth finance, and the last one is called FC quasi-equity. So it's the European Fund for Strategic Investment quasi-equity product, which is indeed a debt-based instrument, but it has some equity features. So it has a high risk taking capacity. It's directed towards very young, very innovative, highly technology-driven companies. So let's quickly go through the three of them. The first one being the infectious diseases financing facility. This is part of the Innofin program. So what you have seen in the previous slide, so here, the orange bit. And what it is essentially a contingent debt instrument, and it's contingent upon success. So we provide finance to a company that is investing into vaccines, drugs, diagnostics devices to combat infectious diseases, and we do it on a contingent basis. So we split the financing in milestones. If you hit the milestone, then you keep on going, and eventually we're going to have to repay the debt. If you don't hit the milestone, there is a forgiveness option embedded into it. So it works essentially as a grant in case of failure. Of course, we don't like such scenarios, so we try to invest into companies that have high success rates. But indeed, the product has this forgiveness option embedded into it, which is quite interesting for companies at their early development stage. So the only caveat here is no preclinical, so it's only clinical, only for clinical trials. And again, once again, targeting vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics devices against infectious diseases. So that's one. And you see here the amounts, so it's pretty wide, between 7.5 and 75 million, with typically a longer maturity compared to what you find in the market, and both euro and local currencies. The other one is the mid-cap growth finance, which is another debt-based instrument, but it has I don't know for how many of you know the financing jargon, but it has a very highly subordinated feature. So it's not the typical, obviously, senior debt that you would find in any commercial bank. So it allows, obviously, DAB to take additional risk, thanks once more to the EU guarantee that is attached to the whole Innofin program. Once again, the amounts are rather substantial, so 7.5 to 25 million, and it's structured as a it can be structured as a deeply subordinated debt into the company. The last product that I want to mention to you is this FC venture debt. So we're no longer talking about the Innofin program. We're talking about now this additional program called the European Fund for Strategic Investments. You may know it as the Juncker Plan. Within this program, we have a pretty interesting product. It's again, sorry for the jargon, it's a venture debt instrument. So it works essentially as a debt product, but it has equity features. So for companies that are not generating cash flow yet, we take equity, we take warrants, for example, on equity. So we take like an option on on a future equity participation, and once again, it can be structured in milestones, and it's less dilutive compared to another equity round, for example. So for the entrepreneurs in the audience, it can be an interesting product. Once again, the investment amount is pretty sizable, between 7.5 and 50 million. We typically invest 50% of a specific investment program, so the company needs to come up with the remaining 50. Can be its own cash flow, can be additional fundraising, can be another commercial bank, can be anything, another commercial bank line. But DAB provides typically 50% of any given investment program. We're talking about companies that are, yes, in their early stage, but already quite sophisticated. So they have gone through multiple fundraising rounds, they have a stable corporate governance, and they have a viable business model that the European Investment Bank can buy into. So it's not the typical startup from the garage, let's say, that you may think of. Nevertheless, it's a rather high-risk taking instrument, and it's very interesting for companies that are in their sort of scale-up, let's say, scale-up phase, if you're talking tech, or that are in late-stage clinical trials, if you're talking about life sciences. If you look at the pricing, there is obviously no indication because it depends on a case-by-case, but since it's venture debt, again, it can be structured very flexibly. It can be cash-based if the company generates cash. It can be warrants or, again, other equity features like profit sharing and so on if the company doesn't generate cash. So I know I'm annoying you with all these terms, but I think the takeaway here is that there are instruments at DAB directly that allow clinical trials they allow companies in their clinical trials to progress with their assets. The last bit, another 2 minutes, is about advisory. So you've seen about the financing instruments of DAB. We have also advisory and technical assistance support for young and innovative companies. And in particular is the team that I'm humbly representing today, which is called Innofin Advisory, which works with companies and projects and allows them to, let's say, we try to give them their best shot, their best chance in accessing financing, whether it's DAB or other financing sources. We work with the companies and we try to make them progress towards a potential due diligence by DAB, or we give access to our network and so on. So this is what we do. We do project advisory, once again, with individual companies. We do market studies in various segments of the innovation economy, whether it's life sciences or innovative transport, space technologies, and so on. We look at the access to finance issues and challenges for companies that are developing products and services in these fields, and we come up with, together with the Commission, we come up with new ways of addressing the financing challenge and the financing gap. And last bit is what we call investment platform, which could be one of the outcome of these market studies. So you identify a financing gap, a suboptimal investment condition. What can we do about it? Shall we create another financing instruments that cater for the needs of these companies? Or should we change the eligibility criteria of our existing financing instruments? Or shall we create an investment platform? Again, this is quite high on the agenda of both the EIB and the European Commission. So this is what we do. Individual projects, market studies, investment platform. One of such market studies, incidentally, is indeed on life science. What we have done, and we're working with the Cornelius team, is identifying what the access to finance issues are for companies, for biotech companies, in 4 bioclusters. And what we have done is taking a lot of this anecdotal knowledge, so that is to say that the investment is short, is fragmented, is focused on selected therapeutic areas. We have taken that and we have given it a bit of analytical substance, let's say. Once again, we have identified the market gaps, and now we are discussing what we can do about it. And the outcome can be the creation of a new financing instrument, a new financing mechanism to support the life science industry, to bring in additional investors, and so on. Just to give you a sense in 30 seconds about our project advisory work, I put here on the slide 2 examples. One is for a biobank, a German-based biobank, was looking for scale-up finance. So it was doing quite well in its niche sort of environment. They needed finance to scale up. So they came to us. Actually, we identified this company via the market study that I mentioned earlier. We explored the various financing options of the AB. We identified what would be the best, the optimal solution for the company, taking into account their financing strategy, their business plan, and so on. And we have prepared, well, first we have assessed the technical merit of their project, something that we do all the time at DAB. And we have put forward a package for, let's say, for our lending team to take forward. This is what we do in advisory. So we're upstream, we prepare the company, and then eventually, ideally, the outcome is a proposal to put forward to our lending colleagues. And the other one is not related to life sciences at all. It's a Danish company that is rolling out fast charging, ultra fast charging network for electric vehicles in the Nordics. They came to us with a very ambitious business plan. We tried to work with the company in sort of making this very ambitious a bit more bankable, which was not at all. And after we have supported one of their EU grant call, we have once again assessed the technical merit of the project, and we have accompanied the management in their fundraising efforts. Now they are at the stage in which they can be proposed for EIB financing. If you go to our website, so this link up here, we have a tool that allows you to navigate the Innofin product suite. So through a series of questions and eligibility criteria, it targets so the product that is most suited to your needs. So I know it's a lot of acronyms, a lot of products. There is a way to navigate this, and this is one of the tools. So thank you.
Okay, my name is Ralf Schmidt. I'm coming actually from Norway. Biovotec is a Norway-based company. We founded the company in 2014. We applied for the SME Phase 1 application in the spring of 2015. We received that one, and we applied at the end of 2015 for the SME 2, Phase 2, and received that at the beginning of 2016. Cornelius asked me to present the company as a kind of a success story. One of my main takeaways, which I want to emphasize, is actually SME grants are actually very depending on the timing when you get it. It's the timing which was important for us. That's why I also present a little bit of the company, not just to show the company, but also to say at which stage did we actually apply for this grant. It doesn't go up again. Yeah. At Biovotec, we are working with advanced wound dressings, where we think we have a unique efficiency compared to affordable price. Chronic wounds are a major health challenge. It's actually the single largest diagnosis and cost in the health system as it is. Due to the fact that they are expensive to treat, they take a long time to treat, and actually due to the aging population, increase of diabetes, the incidence rate increasing heavily. There are quite efficient products out there, but the unit cost of these products is actually quite high. Due to the high unit price, these are actually not used. Most of the countries, you don't even know about them because the health department doesn't allow them to be sold in the respective country. So what we're doing, we're combining something, and please don't laugh, an eggshell membrane. It's the membrane between the egg shell and the egg white. We apply this raw material, which is kind of a placenta for a chicken, and produce a very efficient wound dressing for chronic wounds, but also very inexpensive wound dressing. It's a combination price versus facility. I don't go into details, but the costs of wound care is about 40 billion euros in Europe, 80 billion in the US, most likely underestimated. This is the standard cost. The cost overruns are not in this. Wound dressing is about the 7 billion market. It takes an average about 30 to 40 weeks for a chronic wound to heal, if it heals at all. Actually, it's quite significant. If you have a diabetic wound and you have an amputation, your life expectancy is 80% of the people die within 3 years. So it's really a bad thing which actually happens. It's quite to a certain extent, it's worse than actually cancer. And so you have an increased need of treatment, of better treatment. And having said this, as a wound care, working with it, you get a little bit angry because the doctors are actually pushing this down to the nurses. So there has been not too much research done on wound care because it's so diffuse. It's not so really very taggy to work with it. At the same time, the healthcare systems, for example, the NHS says like we have no more money, so we cannot invest in more healthcare or healthcare costs. So we're looking for treatments which can achieve present or even better outcome, but at a reduced cost. If you look at it in the wound care, they have about roughly two categories. You have the categories of lots of products, foams, dressings. They have limited effect on chronic wounds, but they cost between 2 and 5 euros per unit. Remember, 30 weeks, changing it 4 or 5 times, so it's quite a significant cost. And then you have the expensive ones, which cost about 20 to 25 and 30, 40 euros. They are very efficient. They are claimed to be very efficient. The common thing is that they sell in the US, they hardly sell at all in Europe because the hospitals are not using it, it's too expensive. The difference between using an inexpensive one and an expensive is about 5,000 to 6,000 euros per treatment, per patient. And this is a variable cost where they take the nurses and the doctors as fixed cost. So they have a focus on the variable cost, so these products are not used. So what we're doing, we're getting actually into, we are in a sweet spot where we have the functionality of a biological dressing at the price of a standard dressing. I say this, of course, to talk about Biovotec, but this is the things I think actually which appealed also to the European Union. So there's a significant demand in there, and there's a significant need. We built up the total supply chain. Axial membranes is not a problem. We have a patent on a process where we actually can harvest it. Every third egg in Europe which is eaten is actually industrially cracked, so there's enough raw material there. Then we purify it and we make a final product. Before we applied to the SME2 phase, we actually have performed already preclinical trials. So we have done trials of our reagent on diabetic mice, which don't heal, which you see in the upper side, in the column above. So after 20 days, it hardly heals the wound. Then we treated it with a positive control, which is a human growth factor that healed completely after 20 days. The treatment costs $1,000, and we treated with our material, which costed $1, and we had nearly the same outcome. That was the starting point of our SME2 application. Later on, we also have done some excessive pig studies, where we see, surprisingly actually for us, that we actually finished the granulation of a pig wound within 9 days, which normally should take 20 days. So also on healthy wounds, we are extremely accelerating the wound healer doing this. So as I said before, and this is my main takeaway actually from what we have gone through. We started in 2014 as a typical startup. You start up with financing from yourself, friends and families. We got about 0.6 million euros. Then Norway, and I think also other countries, are very good on local funding. So we applied for a large local R&D grant, which we received, where there's about 50%, 60% grant percentage, which for $2 million. That allowed us to do the basic research and see how does it work with cells, start to build up an organization doing these things. Based on that one, on the success of getting the national research grant, we were also able again to attract private investment. So we went to the next round and we applied for the SME2 and we received that. At that stage it was very difficult, so I'm not agreeing with Cornelius. I actually liked that at that stage only 3% of the companies applied got the grant. Because why did I like it? Because I received from the European Union 1.3 million euros, but on the back of this success, because a lot of investors actually don't understand the science, at least not in Norway. So, and if you start to talk science, mostly the investment doesn't come. Except if you want to go to venture, which is different. But if you go other financial investors, so they look for some kind of accreditation, something like saying, oh yeah, this is really good. So we used, and I think it's right, we used the SME grant, which we received as our accreditation. So I received 1.3, but I raised $3 million on top of it. So I got actually twice or in 2.5 times more money from the private market than I actually received from the SME. And I think that is a very interesting setting. So if you ever apply for SME, you get it, use the momentum, use the documentation which you have, and go and get more money in, because you will always spend more than you expect. We are now in 2017. We continue to do it. There's a different company will develop, and we will launch our product in 2018. So my main takeaways. The writing of an SME grant takes time. And this is very personal and probably wrong. I would never let it as a third party administrate it. There are a lot of people out there which writing grants and doing think this is a good idea, because writing a grant yourself, it actually is kind of your first stage of your business plan. You have to think through it and do this yourself, because it's in itself a good exercise. What we did, we wrote it ourselves and we gave it to an expert and said, you have 15 hours, read through it and use the right words, if you know what I mean. So that we did. But we did it ourselves because it really forced you to plan, it forced you to cost your activities, and that is something actually investors in your company will ask for anyway. So just get it done. The second one is probably ridiculous, but there are companies out there, or there are people out there which actually write grants to get the money to do something, but not really looking for. What I wanted to say with this, don't let the grant determine your pace of development. The thing as a startup company you have to least of is not money, it's actually time, because time is money. So don't go in a 1 year waiting modus just to wait for something. Do it, so the timing of applying this is actually very crucial for the progress of the total company. It is seen, the grant is seen as an accreditation, as I said before. The national research councils, they love it because, at least Norway, they pay money to the European Union, so they feel very nice when they get something back. They cherish you, you get free public, you get actually quite a good public exposure. At least we got it in Norway, which again helps your financing. Professional investors, professional investors also like it, as I said before. We did it probably a little bit wrong. We were doing quite a very detailed program on reports. So we actually claimed to write 32 reports. In hindsight, we're writing a lot of reports at the moment, you know. But on the other side, if someone wants to do a due diligence on us, we can actually just give them the SME project, because everything which we do is actually documented in that file on the scientific side. Then we all, or you guys, we work on R&D. R&D means that there is risks. So we had a setback in the middle of it, and we were really worried, how do we handle this now with the EU? Can we do it? And they seem to be actually surprisingly flexible on it. They acknowledge that there's R&D. If you have a setback, you have to fix it, and that's what we're doing at the moment. So that is, and there was no doubt about in my head. For us, it was extremely good. I would do it again. It's extremely good. The numbers: 2 million from the euros from the national research grants, 1.3 from the EU, but 5 million from private, which are based on accreditation of these things. So don't only look at it as the money you get from the SME. Use it as an accreditation, and if you get it, run with it and finance your company. Thank you.
So thanks for staying with us. Any questions to Ralf, or actually to all of us now? Really hope you have some questions, because this is really the opportunity. I mean, you can see all the things online, but here you have the opportunity to talk to us. I can just add maybe on what Ralf said. I mean, the reporting, so we have a minimum of reporting once yearly, I suppose, or is it 18 months, or?
Actually for us, because we started with fund, we have it every 6 months.
Okay, but a lot of, as Ralf said, a lot of it is up to the application itself. Yeah. You write into the application the deliverables that you want to deliver, and of course they need to make sense in the overall frame of your project, but this is not, it's not that we impose on every SME instrument, but you said that, so in all fairness. Yeah, please.
It was actually surprisingly easy, because at that time, you know, like Norway just got 3 SME projects. So it actually came into the national news that now a Norwegian company again has received the SME grant. So it was in the newspapers. And then we used that one. We, of course, before, because we didn't know if we get this, so we were in discussions with some investors. And before, you always, as a startup company, you have to be always in discussion with investors, because unfortunately it's the way it is. And they were like all investors, they were waiting and trying to get the price down and all this. And then this accreditation came in, and all of a sudden, you know, the psychology changed. And then a window opened, and when the window opened, we just hit it. So it's national public publicity, plus that you actually can get some of your investors, which you talk anyway with, to jump down from the fence and get it.
So in general, the applications for the SME instrument are reviewed not by us, not by officials, but by experts, by independent experts. In the case of the SME instrument, we actually don't take any pure academics. We always have people with a business background as evaluators. And so I think there is no answer in terms of 1, 2, or 3 or something, but it will depend on the context, but the people that will judge you are basically your peers in more experience. So there are people with a technical background in the business that you're in. They are also people with a business and financial background, and they will look into whether your IP regimen and your applications are appropriate for your field. So I can't give you a more specific answer, also because I'm not an expert in that.
I just want to say,
yeah.
And that is good. That is exactly what Cornelius said is what attracts the other investors. It really does, because if it would be just a scientific evaluation, they wouldn't care so much about it. It is a little bit of a validation, not only of the science, but also the business model.
So for the SME, what I said was true for the SME instrument, because we have a very clear market focus there. For the collaborative projects, we have a mix of people with an academic background and people from science. And but yeah, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I can comment also from the financial instrument perspective. So at the EIB, so when we do the commercial due diligence of our projects, you look at the financial side. So you have finance experts, and you have also technical experts in different fields. So if you need to assess the technical merit of a new road, you have road engineers. If you have a life science project, you would have life science experts looking into it. These two combined make the overall assessment of the project, which needs to be, one, technically sound, and two, needs to have its own financial standing. So, but again, we're talking about financial instruments here, not grants. So the company needs to have obviously a certain financial standing on its own. So depending on the instrument, we're talking about perhaps more advanced, more sophisticated projects. But again, as you have seen in the presentation, there are instruments targeting also younger and more innovative and technology-driven companies as well. But so to your point, yes, technical assessment is part of our assessment.
Yes. Formally, yes, certainly legally. I mean, the only requirements for us is that your legal entity is based in an EU member state or associated country. That's the eligibility criterion to participate in the SME instrument. So we don't care about your passport, we care about where the legal entity is based. And since you probably don't apply as an individual, but with your company, that is the criterion. Was that the answer to your question?
Yeah. Okay. I'm happy to give you an answer to something.
Okay, we have 4 more minutes or so. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll repeat your question. Stop me if I got it wrong immediately. Okay, I understood the first question as what are the requirements for application for the SME instrument, also in terms of numbers, or how many, or was that?
How many people were structured when they applied?
Ah, that was too loud.
Okay. We were 5 people at that time. The reporting was, as I said, it is actually, I take that completely on myself. We made a very detailed project plan, and then somehow we didn't have time to actually compress it and have a major, so we have a lot of reporting. It will, I'm not kidding, but it will at least take close to half a man-year. But again, that is a summary of all reports you actually do. And as we are medicine or medical device, you need a design review anyway, right? So what he is basically doing, reporting to the EU, but writing the documentation for the design reviews. So how much more time it is, I wouldn't know. It's just, it forces you actually to be quite precise when you have to do it.